Week 2 was filled with surprising performances and some injuries that dug into yours and your fantasy opponent's teams. With that being said, there are some crazy values to trade for that can up your team's odds as we head into week 3. Let's jump into them. We'll start with Chris Godwin. The main focus in Tampa is going to be on Mike Evans after he exploded for 171 yards with 29.1 points in a standard PPR format in week 2. He literally demolished the Chicago Bears, and quite honestly, all of the attention is probably on the 30-year-old. To that, I say phenomenal. Let the attention be on him. This was the perfect storm for Chris Godwin's value, because while he had a quieter day with 5 receptions for 58 yards and no score, guess what? He still had the same amount of targets as Evans, so we know the usage and opportunity is there. Godwin is more than 2 years younger than Mike Evans, who, by the way, hasn't been paid yet. He's also attracted more targets in the last 2 years than Evans, despite playing in less games than him. This is someone who seems to be overshadowed by somebody going for his 10th straight season with at least 1,000 receiving yards, but hey, there's room for everyone in this offense. Baker Mayfield has thrown the ball 68 times through 2 weeks. Godwin has been a 1,000-yard receiver himself in 3 of the last 4 years. I also truly believe that this Bucs team is going to need to throw the ball over the course of the next few weeks. As we see here, they have a gauntlet of a schedule coming up, playing the Eagles, the revitalized Saints, the Lions, the Falcons, and the Bills. No thanks. They're going to have to throw a ton to stay competitive. I don't see the Buccaneers comfortably winning these games to the point where it becomes a run-heavy script. Now let's go to Jahmyr Gibbs. 2 weeks into the career of Jahmyr Gibbs, and he only has 23 touches, while David Montgomery has 38. Well, David Montgomery is out, and the floodgates should seemingly be open. This was a buy low value, but now, obviously, David Montgomery being out just opens a ton of opportunity for Gibbs. I've got all the confidence in the world that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be just fine, and then some, because of what we've seen from a receiving perspective through the first couple of weeks. He's had 11 targets, including 9 of them back in week 2 to David Montgomery's 1 target over the course of 2 games. Even when Montgomery comes back, this should be a feasible tandem. We know all about what the Lions did last year with Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift, and it's not a secret. They're doing the exact same thing this year with 2 backs that have very different builds and player profiles. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to slip out in the open field and try to get to that second and third level to make players miss, while David Montgomery is going to muscle through the tackles and try to get the hard-fought yards. From a volume perspective, we're seeing positive signs for Gibbs. We're being notified when he'll have more touches. And we got a direct quote from Dan Campbell saying that it was his goal to ease the rookies in during week 1 before letting them all loose. That, of course, includes Gibbs. Not to mention, if we look at the big picture, the Lions are in a division that is up for grabs. Odds experts have them as the favorite to win the NFC North, meaning game script-wise, the Lions are set out to get ahead and be in a position to feed their running backs to steal a decent amount of games this year. Diontae Johnson is at such a discount right now, and as much as I hate saying this, it's because of some pretty poor luck. Let's walk through this one. In 2022, Diontae Johnson was 7th in the entire league in targets. He had more targets than guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Chris Godwin, Devonta Smith, Christian Kirk, Amari Cooper, and Mike Evans. So clearly, through the quarterback switch from Mitch Trubisky to Kenny Pickett, there was a constant, and that was to look for Diontae Johnson. Now with that, the guy was thrown just 95 catchable targets out of 147, a rate of 65% when the league average for catchable target rate was at 79%. Now back to the bright sides where he prevailed. Despite having less receptions than Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, Diontae Johnson had more broken tackles than them with 8, tied for 6th most in the league. The guy is just slippery out there. He always has been. Well, guess what? Despite having 147 targets, 86 receptions, and a team best 16 red zone targets last year, Diontae Johnson had 0 touchdowns. Now, even with one of the worst catchable pass rates and 0 touchdowns to his name, Johnson cracked the top 30 for wide receivers in standard PPR. Now let's fast forward to this year. Johnson puts up a subpar performance with 3 receptions for 38 yards against the 49ers and goes down with a hamstring injury. He now misses week 2. There are definitely some red flags in that Johnson resides in a fresh offense under a new QB that's still adjusting to the league, but the volume has been there. The chances have all been there. And I mean, all we need is Diontae Johnson to rack up a few touchdowns, which seems feasible if he has more time to get on the same page as second-year QB Kenny Pickett, and we're golden. Trade for this guy who is just waiting to explode after being by far the favorite target on the team last year, and in a few weeks, you could be winning big. A.J. Dillon is definitely a buy low candidate because the guy had every opportunity to go off this past week, and he just didn't. The reason I would even buy on A.J. Dillon in the first place is because of his role in this offense. I really don't believe this is the last time he sees high volume, whether there's Aaron Jones or not. Jordan Love, a first-year starting QB, is surrounded by youth in Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Luke Musgrave, all within their first 2 years of a league. Meanwhile, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon are the vets, and they've been used a lot. The Packers have also just leaned on the run more than we're used to. They've run the ball 53 out of 104 times through 2 games. That is a 51% rush rate, the highest rate we've seen over the course of the last decade. Dillon has 28 of those 53 rushes, and while the efficiency hasn't been there, the Packers have shown plenty of trust in him. This is more of a deep league move, essentially noticing the usual trend we see where a team opts for a run-heavy scheme as they ease their new QB into the offense. We also don't know Aaron Jones' status for week 3 yet, so it doesn't hurt to deal for somebody like A.J. Dillon. Now, Garrett Wilson. There are obvious question marks with the QB position and whether or not the Jets will look for someone to take over for Zach Wilson. One of 2 things will happen in New York, okay? Zach Wilson either develops and starts turning the 5 months of learning behind Aaron Rodgers into results, and Garrett Wilson sees the benefits. Or New York goes and signs a veteran quarterback to fill in, bringing the passing game closer to what it was supposed to be with Rodgers. It's a win-win. As crazy as the history of decision-making within the New York Jets organization has been over the last few years, there is no way you throw everything in the kitchen sink to Green Bay for a franchise quarterback and do not find a way to get him a competent backup should he even have a chance at returning for a possible playoff run. Either way, the value of Garrett Wilson has taken a serious dip with Rodgers going down. We've seen him salvage an 1,100-yard season with Zach as the primary guy. He's broke free for a touchdown in each of his first 2 games, but going 2 for 8 on targets against the Cowboys is indicative that this talent at the wide receiver position is being held back. This was also against one of the toughest defenses in the league in the Dallas Cowboys, so again, enjoy the discounted value after an odd stat line for Wilson this week. Go capitalize and understand that if the Jets don't see results under center, they're likely going to go and grab somebody. Regardless, the expectation is quality play at the QB position, which Garrett Wilson is bound to benefit from. It's only a matter of time, folks. For Justin Herbert, we've already seen some rapport established between the talented signal caller from Oregon and, knock on wood, a fully healthy receiving core through the first pair of weeks. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams only played a handful of games together in 2022, but right now, the Chargers' depth chart looks pretty dang good with Allen, Williams, Palmer, and Gerald Everett. Allen and Williams have 1,000-yard seasons under their belts, and Everett quietly set career highs in receptions, yards, and touchdowns in 2022. And oh yeah, when Austin Eckler, somebody who led all running backs with 107 receptions in 2022 comes back, that's another asset for Justin Herbert. Passing volume. Obviously, Austin Eckler not playing may have something to do with this, but we saw Kellen Moore let Herbert go out there in week 2. Allowing him to throw the ball 8 more times than he did in week 1, and in a pass-heavy scheme as opposed to the run-heavy approach that we saw in the opening week. Oh yeah, and that Kellen Moore guy. He was the offensive coordinator for a Dallas Cowboys team that was 4th in the NFL in scoring in 2022 with 26.8 points per contest. That's more than 3 points better per game than the Chargers had last year. The first 2 games of the season under Moore, this offense has run 67.5 plays per game, consistent with their mark from last year that, oh, by the way, was the 2nd highest rate in the league. Easier matchups are also on the way for Mr. Herbert. He'll be taking on the Vikings, Raiders, and Bears in 3 of the next 5 weeks, with the Bears already losing Kyler Gordon to the IR. Roschon Johnson's up next. He could very well be available in your leagues for just picking him up, but I'm making a case for a couple of reasons should you have to go and trade for him. For one, in a limited sample size, he's super efficient. He has 9 rushes for 52 yards with an average of 5.8 yards per carry. And in week 2, Khalil Herbert was also efficient. He had 5 yards per carry, but Roschon Johnson one-upped him with 4 rushes for 32 yards and even broke to the 3rd level to show off his breakout speed against the Buccaneers. Looking at Johnson's prospect profile, he had the best efficiency rating of any running back in the 2023 rookie class. His 3.96 yards after contact average, 5.1 broken tackle rate, and 5.9 eluded tackle rate were all top 5 in his class. The next aspect is his pass catching upside. For someone who is 6'2" and greater than 220 pounds, he's got a knack for finding the ball specifically when Fields is under pressure. In week 1, he tied for the most targets on the team with 7 targets. He then came back and had 2 receptions in 2 targets this week to stay involved. One may argue that the Bears are going to have to throw the ball a lot considering they're already 0-2 and look horrible, but the Bears ran the ball 60% of the time, a league high last year, while going a league worst 3-14. D'Onta Foreman was a healthy scratch in week 2, and even with only 6 touches, Johnson logged 42 yards and honestly made a case to push for that RB2 spot in Chicago even once Foreman is back. Now Nico Collins, look, we love a good old wide receiver one on a team that is expected to lose a lot of games this year, but this situation looks a lot more promising than even I originally thought. We know that teams like this Texans squad that has a line set at 5.5 wins are expected to throw the ball a ton because of all of the deficits they're supposed to face. But that doesn't mean they have to do it well. CJ Stroud was slinging it. 384 passing yards on 8.2 yards per attempt is no joke, and Nico Collins was one of 3 recipients of at least 9 targets in Houston's 31-20 loss to Indianapolis this past week. Something we don't typically see is a combination of high yards per reception and a high catch rate, but Nico Collins married both of those concepts. 20.9 yards per reception and nearly a 150-yard game, as he has now set a career high in receiving yards in back-to-back weeks. At one point against the Colts, the man caught 4 passes in a row of at least 20 yards. Collins now has a combined 20 targets in the first 2 games, a touchdown, and looks to be the lead guy alongside Tank Dell and Robert Woods. Although he doesn't need to be a decisive one on a week-by-week basis if we see more performances like this, Houston ran 73 plays while trying to play catch-up with their AFC South Division rival, an amount that leaves room for everybody. Thank you so much for watching. As always, pop any questions I was unable to answer in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if we're helping you get better at fantasy football heading into week 3, and we will see you in the next video.